Here at GIBS, and I think that we're in for a very interesting session this morning. I'm sure you all would have read the section that explained that mind-brain integration has been found to really lead to success in all sorts of areas. You would have seen top-level management, you would have seen musicians, you would have seen athletes. And so this morning, it's a real pleasure for me to welcome our guest speaker, all the way from Iowa, I believe, in America, in the States. This is Dr. Fred Travis. He is from the Maharishi University, where he received his PhD in the late 80s, I believe.
88, very good.
And had a sort of a stint away on a postdoc position, but then went back to teach and head up the center there for the research in brain, consciousness, and cognition. And so, as you can see, we're going to have some practical explanations this morning. So can I ask us to give Dr. Travis a warm welcome to GIBS?
Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be here. Thank you for coming out at this early morning. We're going to be looking at mind-brain development. And we're looking at it as a new angle to how to gain excellence. And we'll be looking at excellence across the board, in business, in management, in education, in sports. Those who like to read, there's a book which goes into greater detail of everything I'm speaking about, Excellence Through Mind-Brain Development. My colleague, Harald Harang, is in Norway. He's a businessman, and he brought his business expertise, combined it with my neuroscience expertise, to look at a brain-based model of excellence. So here's the wholeness of what I'll be discussing. Higher mind-brain development is the basis of higher performance. The reason this is true is your brain is the interface between you and the world. You're seeing me right now because of activation of the brain. Light from the PowerPoint comes into your eyes, goes to the back part of the brain. It's the ringing in your brain that lets you see me. And what that means is if you're tired, the brain, the interface between you and the world is tired, you're not getting a complete picture of the world. If you go into a business problem and your mind is filled with other anxieties, if your mind is tired, if it's distracted, you're not going to see the essence of what is there. So that's why we're going to focus on brain and brain development. What we'll be looking at is the research, which Ria so kindly said. And mind-brain development is true for you as an individual, but also your organization. Your organization is like a brain, and the individuals are like the neurons. And everything I'm saying about brain integration for you as an individual, think about it for your organization. You need communication between different aspects of the organization. You need the optimal development of each department and its functioning. We'll be looking at 3 studies. Ria mentioned we looked at top-level managers, world-class athletes, these are Olympic athletes, and also professional musicians. And this is the core of the idea of mind-brain development. Mind-brain development has 3 aspects to it. One is individual psychological development. This is from Piaget, cognitive development, moral development, ego development. Frequency of peak experiences, experiences of transcendence. And last is the level of brain integration. Brain integration underlies the others. And for peak performance, you need not only mind-brain development, but you have to attend to the social context. Because we're not classical beings that collide in the workplace. We're enmeshed in the system within which we're working. And we're determining the quality of the system is determining the quality of individual performance. I'm going to be focusing primarily on mind-brain development here. So let's look at these 3 circles individually. We start with brain integration. Being a neuroscientist, I think it's most important. So what it is this is a measure which grew out of our measurement of growth of consciousness through meditation practices. And what we find is what develops as people's inner experience changes is the whole brain begins to function more as a unit. This is looking top down, this is the front of the brain. The front of the brain is the boss of the brain. That's where you're sitting in the organization. And as you're sitting there, you don't need to walk to all the departments. They send information to you. And that's what's happening in the brain. All the parts of the brain send information here to the front. Puts it together and sends it out. So what we're seeing is that character of brain functioning is functioning more as a whole. It's more integrated. It's taking each part, putting it relative to the whole. A second measure is different frequencies. The alpha frequency is a frequency of self-awareness. It's more internally directed. Gamma frequency is a frequency when you look out and you see something. In fact, just before you recognize an object, you see a burst in this frequency. It's very much tied with outer perception. And what we're finding in higher brain integration is that people are more inner-oriented. They're not lost in the dynamics and the chaos that's outside. They have more an internal frame of reference. This last one is a little complicated, but what it's looking at is, this is a second and a half. This line is one stimulus. This line is a second stimulus. And what you see happening is you're constantly preparing for what you expect to come. So this is a preparatory response. What is the degree of preparation? This turquoise bar here is where you actually quantify that. And what we found is the match between brain preparation and the dynamics of the situation were better as brain integration was higher. By better, I mean when you had to be receptive and taking in information, that's what the brain was doing. When you had to act and focus, that was the brain was doing. So we add these three together, and that gives us brain integration. Now this measure is from EEG. We'll be looking in a sample of EEG here, which measures electrical activity over the scalp. But the same idea of brain integration being important comes from work with fMRI, neuroimaging. And what they found was they looked at 2,000 people, and what they found is low connectivity, is measured by blood flow, was associated with anger, rule-breaking, substance use, and so on. High connectivity, higher vocabulary, memory, life satisfaction, income. And it sort of makes sense. If the brain is the interface between inner and outer, if the brain is not integrated, if the parts are not contributing to the whole, it's going to lead to dysfunction. It's going to lead to mistakes. If the brain is more integrated, it's going to lead to greater success. So we took this measure, which I said we developed from meditation experience, and Harald and I thought we should see this measure growing in successful people. Why? Successful people can make decisions under stress. They can deal with a wide range of inputs. They have the vision to see what's going to happen 6 months, 2 years, 5 years down the line. So this is what our research was showing. First we looked at world-class athletes. They participated in Olympic Games, World Games, both groups did. But the world-class athletes finished in the top 10 for 3 seasons in their competitive career. They were those that could not only place into the Olympics, but they were at that upper end. We see compared to the control athletes who got into the Olympics, but they didn't consistently place, they have higher levels of brain integration. We went to managers. We found a similar phenomenon. The top level managers were CEOs for 18 years or longer. The company had prospered over that time. They also were socially responsible. We didn't want Enron managers who made themselves rich, but they would actually take money from others. So this is top-level managers that have that broader vision. What is my business contributing to the whole situation? Again, compared to control managers, they have higher levels of brain integration. And we asked the managers, how come? How'd you do it? What's your secret? No one said they were smarter. No one said they worked harder. What they all said is they had more inner clarity to pick up those inner urges, that inner intuition, that gut level feeling. And they said they could rely on that. And especially in business, you don't know all the factors you need to know when you make a decision. It's just the nature of management. So what they would do is take the data which is there, and then they would sit inside and think, okay, what should we do? And that impulse would come, and they know they could rely on it. This description of intuition is what's the practical value of having higher brain integration. What's the practical value of having more integrated functioning in this interface between you and the world? Classical musicians, professional and amateur classical musicians. Professional musicians have higher levels of brain integration. Amateur musicians do too. We thought, oh, there goes our theory, it's out the window. Well, we looked into the literature, and what's found is if you play music as a child, your brain is connected differently as an adult. Because where every other child is math, language arts, it's all convergent, it's one right answer. What music is doing is you're focusing on a point, but what you're also doing is you're taking the whole. What is your note relative to the melody line? What is what you're playing relative to the whole orchestra? So it develops a different style of brain function. You more see part and whole. You're able to integrate specific localized functioning and more global values. Doing that as a child, those brain circuits continue as an adult. I think it's one reason the amateurs have higher levels of brain integration. And there's another reason, and that's a fault in the design, and that is professional and amateur doesn't differentiate how well you play music. What it differentiates is how you make your money. And the amateur musicians were very gifted in music, but that was their avocation. They were very successful in IT, business, nursing, and so on. Now, I have brain integration from practice of transcendental meditation, and we'll be getting back to this. And the whole point I want to make is transcendental meditation is a practical tool to develop all of the aspects of mind-brain development. It's a practical tool for you to grow in excellence in whatever field you're in. So this is the first point, brain integration. Usually at this point I would stop and take questions. But I think what I'll do is do the presentation and then we'll leave time for 15, 20 minutes of questions at the end. So if you have a question, just jot it down on your napkin. Or maybe on the paper, which is there. The second point. This is looking at psychological development. We use moral reasoning as a measure of psychological development. And moral reasoning ranges from being egocentric to world-centric. It ranges from, well, I'm doing this because I'm profiting from it, versus social-centric, I'm doing this is a correct action because it's helping the society or it's helping the world itself. And what we found in our world-class athletes, they were more world-centric, and the others were more egocentric. That means when they made a decision, they actually took a much broader range of important elements to make their decision. Peak experiences. Actually, was what drove Harald and I to do this research, because we thought spontaneous peak experiences, which are reported during athletic competitions, may contribute to growth of brain integration. Because these peak experiences are what are reported when we transcend. We did not actually find that relationship. We found everyone had peak experiences. Here's some examples of what we mean by peak experiences. When I have this extreme alertness, the body reacts automatically. Everything goes by itself. It goes by intuition. Peak experiences are characterized by wholeness, by you and the system working together. Here's another example. As if my inner reality expands to include the activity of the whole orchestra, even the audience. The professional musicians that we measured, they spoke about a real magical time can happen where the audience and them are one. And that the audience is listening, and that's why they're playing, but it's the appreciation of the audience which is allowing the playing to go to its high level. It's just a whole new system. And last, it's difficult to describe, but it feels like experiencing a kind of eternity, contrary to everyday life, which is in continuous motion. It's taking out that part of life, that part of experience which is silent. We usually overlook it. But it's that silence which fills in and which connects specific experiences. And what we found in our research, we did over 200 people, 84% reported peak experiences. It's a real experience. How many people here have had experiences they may call peak experiences? Yeah, very good. And what was interesting is we asked the musicians about peak experiences. All the classical musicians had their peak experiences when they were playing, when they were performing. The control musicians had peak experiences, but it wasn't during musical performance. It's when they were cooking, or when they were writing, or when they were walking. And I often thought that those peak experiences was what drove those professional musicians to take that as their vocation. Okay, so here we have the three. I'd like to look at meditation as a means to develop these three. And an important point is meditations are different. So I'm going to go through three different categories of meditation. And this is where I'm going to ask for your participation. I'm going to be giving you descriptions of meditation, as we have here. Read it and tell me what stands out for you. What are the points that are coming out from this description? Yes?
Breathing is very important.
Good breathing? Yes. Good. Others? Yes, and back. Thank you.
Attention comes to a very sharp point of focus.
Sharp point of focus. Very good. And notice what it's held on by. It's held on by the rising and falling of the abdomen. Notice there's no sense of the rest of my body, no sense of the environment. Indeed, they won't even speak about a sense of self or experiencer. Rather, the whole experience is focused on whatever is the object of experience. This is it's called a non-dual experience, so just one thing there. What is the thing? It's the object of the diaphragm moving up and down. Now, this is a description of Vipassana meditation. Vipassana is in a category called focused attention, and these are meditations which do that. They focus on one object, and the whole purpose of the meditation is to have that one object completely fill awareness. So Zen meditation. There's one practice where you keep your attention in the middle of the brain. It's called the third ventricle meditation. Every time your attention moves, you go back there. Compassion meditation is also in focused meditation, where what you're developing is a pure experience of loving kindness, of compassion. And by pure, it's not a qualitative adjective, but it means without an object, just experiencing that experience in itself. Now, when you focus, this is the brainwave you see. This is a second. This is actually what the brainwave looks like. It goes up and down 20 to 50 times per second. It's probably in your brains right now. We came to this beautiful day, beautiful restaurant, delightful breakfast. We go into a talk, we're beginning to get a little bit detailed, but you came here for a purpose. You wanted to understand this. So suddenly you forgot who's sitting on either side of you. You forgot what's on your breakfast plate. You're completely focusing in. And this is what the brain does for you to do that. It's actually it's called interneurons. You're actually connecting small brain areas so you get one piece out of the whole. This is focused attention. Let's look at another. Again, what stands out? So anyone, what stands out? Yes, please.
Focus and breathing.
Focus and breathing. Notice the focus is a little different. This is more of a being mindful of the breath rather than keeping the attention solely on the breath. That's good. What else do you notice? Yes? Accessing memory. Excellent. Notice in this meditation, which is different from the other, which is having one experience, rising and falling of the diaphragm, this allows all experiences to pass through awareness. It's said that you do this non-reactively. That is, you don't judge what the experience is, you don't try to fix it, you don't try to excuse it, you just note it and let it go. It mentions this flip book of memories. And notice in this description there's a sense of I. or experiencer or subject. How did they describe their I? It's not as an observer and experiencer, it's in terms of their memory. There's, in some meditation traditions, the ego, the experiencer, is the sum of thoughts about yourself. It's your autobiographical self. Who am I? Oh, I grew up in South Africa, and I went to this school, and so on. This is a second category of meditation. This is an experience of mindfulness meditation, and this is in the category called open monitoring. That is, you're just open to the experience. You're mindful of the changing experience. And what these meditations are doing is not focusing on the object, or focus isn't quite the right word, but that's not the purpose of the meditation. The purpose of this meditation is notice that process between you and the environment, you and your experience. You're not really concerned what the experience is. In fact, you just allow the experiences to move. You're not really concerned who the experiencer is. You're more seeing that relationship between you and ongoing experience. When you're doing this type of cognitive process, these are the brain waves that are seen. One is called theta, it's 4 to 8 cycles per second. The other is the upper end of the alpha frequency, it's 10 to 12 cycles per second. It's in the back part of the brain. Now there's information again in the frequency. Theta is whenever you're following internal mental processing. After this breakfast, you're going to go back to the car, you get in your car, you'll be going to wherever you're going. And in your mind, you're going to sort of follow the mental map. Yes, I'll go here, and I'll take this left, and I'll get on the freeway. As you're going through internal mental processing, you'll see theta. This is actually produced by the part of the brain that encodes memory. This alpha, the upper end of alpha, is a typical understanding of alpha is simply idling. What you're doing to be able to watch, say, thoughts, you have to decrease the input of vision, of hearing, of touch. And that's what this upper end of alpha is doing, alpha 2. It signifies brain areas that you may want to use later, but you don't want them to interfere with what you're doing right now. So they're just idling. For instance, you process the brain vision from the back part of your brain. If you close your eyes, you'll see this alpha 2 frequency in the back part of your brain. Why? Because there's nothing coming from your eye to the back part of your brain. So your brain, back part of your brain doesn't have to do anything. And rather than shutting it off, how the brain is structured is it has this idling frequency. So when you open your eyes, immediately you can process. So this is a second meditation. First is focused attention. Second is open monitoring. So here's the third category. Again, I'll let you read it. What stands out for you? Yes? Silence, peace, yes. Notice this one also has I in it. And notice how I is defined here. It's rather low, I apologize. I am completely whole and at peace. It's not the I which is the social I, it's not the mental I, it's not the thinking I, it's more the I which is the experiencer, the I which is whole. Now, this is a description of transcendental meditation practice. And in this meditation, you're not concerned with a specific object, you're not concerned with the relationship between you and objects, but you want to experience who you are. Who are you when the mental chatter settles down? Who are you when your thinking and planning settles down? What is that which is flowing through the senses, which is flowing through the mind, which is driving you? Now this meditation is in a third category called automatic self-transcending. Automatic self-transcending. It starts from thinking, but it ends up with being, with wakefulness, with silence. And this experience also has another brain pattern. It's the lower end of alpha, 8 to 10 hertz, primarily in the front of the brain. Remember what the front of the brain is. That's where you're sitting. That's the CEO. That's the boss of the brain. So what is happening is this part of your brain is being exercised in a very specific way. And we'll see in the specific way how it's being exercised. But first, How do we see all these meditation categories? How do they relate? This is an analogy which Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who brought transcendental meditation out to the world, this is an analogy he uses, and that is, he uses the analogy of a knife, because our mind is a tool. We use the mind to develop thinking, we can use problem-solving skills, we can use mnemonics and so on, and we use the mind to move the body, we use the mind to get things done. So he says, other meditations are basically teaching you how to use the knife. That is, during the meditation, you're constructing a mental tool to cope with the world. You're an accountant. You have to be able to focus. A focused attention meditation will allow you to focus better after meditation. Or mindfulness. You're in a really high-paced, chaotic office. Mindfulness will help you to have a little distance between you and what's going on. Automatic self-transcending is not developing a new cognitive tool. It's not teaching you how to use the knife, but rather you're sharpening the knife. You're actually changing the mental state within which everything is falling. You're changing that clarity of who you are. So when that attention flows through the mind, it flows through the senses, it actually is doing it in a fundamentally different way. So let's explore this, because I think transcendental meditation is the one meditation that develops these three aspects of mind-brain development. First, this is looking at blood flow. Brain's looking to the right. Red means increased blood flow. So this is the front of the brain. Notice in this process of transcending, of going to greater silence and peace, the boss of the brain, blood flow is higher. And it's higher not because of thinking and doing, it's higher because of being. Just inner wakefulness is higher. The brainstem, blood flow is lower. The brainstem is the area of the brain that gets you going. So what you see here is a marker of rest, and that means physically the body is rested. Mentally, the mental chatter is settling down, but it's not inert. It's not becoming more dull. It's actually alert at the same time. It's restful alertness. It's a whole new experience. When we sleep, blood flows down in both places. When your favorite team is one point behind in whatever they're playing and they have the ball, everything blood flow is high. We know rest, we know activity, but this is both of them together. And what this is giving is that basis for brain integration, for the basis for integrated functioning of the brain, but being able to focus at the same time. These are the brain waves that you see during transcendental meditation. I want to show you these because we'll be looking at Ellis's brain waves next. X-axis is time. The y-axis is different points on the brain where we're recording brain waves. Let's look at this second here. Each of these columns is a second. So let's see how fast this is going up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is what a 10 cycle per second wave looks like. Notice it's the same over the whole brain. It's the same over the whole brain because the whole brain is settling to that state of silence. There's not part of the brain that's working and then part of the brain which is quiet, but the whole brain is settled to that silent state. Also notice that the lines are going up and down together. What that is can be quantified, and it's called in neuroscience coherence. And we actually talked about that as one of the measures of brain integration, greater coherence in the front of the brain. This is what greater coherence looks like. What does coherence mean? Coherence means that those parts of the brain are functioning together. You have 100 billion processors. How do you get them all to work together? We actually coordinate being awake and alert, or being awake and quiet, awake and quiet, awake and quiet. And when they're awake, they're sending information. When they're quiet, they're resting. So by being coherent, you're actually aligning up the flow of information through the brain. So now we'll look under the hood. I think I have a little time here. Are there any burning questions before we look under the hood? So this is what the brain looks like when 150 high-powered businessmen are looking at you. Excuse me. High-powered businessmen and women are looking at you. This is the front left, so this is this one here. The other one is front right. These are eye blinks. We notice the signal is higher, and it's higher not because it's coming from the brain, it's actually coming from the eye muscles itself. Each one of these points is a second. This is the beta or gamma that we talked about. Notice it's going up quite fast. And it's doing that because Elvis has to take all these people, he's parsing them, what you're wearing, how your attention is, and so on. Now this is coherence. And when coherence is down at the bottom here, where coherence is low, it means that the brain areas are beginning to break apart, doing different things. When it goes back up to the top, it just means that those brain areas are beginning to work as a whole. And what you're seeing here is the brain is quite variable. It's going up and down, the brain coherence. And that's a healthy brain. Because we don't want to have everything when we're in activity on at the same time. You want to have differentiation there. So any questions on what you're seeing? Okay, so now close your eyes, begin your TM practice. Elvis. So you can stop your meditation, open the eyes. I'm going to play it back. I'm going to ask you to tell me when he started his TM practice. Oh my goodness. It's a pop quiz. I didn't tell you had to do this. Okay. There we go. So has he started TM yet? No. Very good. And the coherence is actually lagging because has he started yet? Yes. Good. You're alert. Now notice the change in brain waves. From very fast here, this is alpha activity here, this is alpha activity here. Here it is. In the beginning of meditation, you notice it's mixed with fast activity. It's that idea of the thoughts are becoming more and more secondary. And what's becoming more primary is this inner silence. This period here, look at how clear the alpha activity is. It's a very dynamic process of going into silence, some faint thought activity going into silence. And what you're becoming more familiar with is that level of yourself which is not active, but is awake. That level of yourself which is silent, which is whole, which is aware, which is ready for the next step to occur. And then by doing that during the meditation, and this is what we'll look at, you can bring that into activity. And that's what brain integration is. So here we stop meditation. We see the brain has changed, coherence has gone down. We do this this is not our research equipment. It's for a demonstration. But I think you get the idea how the brain can go into a whole new style of functioning. Thank you very much, Alice. Let's give him a hand. Great. You're off the hot seat now. So what we'll be looking at is, I want to go a little more deeply into this coherence. These are coherence maps. Each column is a frequency band. Each dot is where we record brainwaves. There's 32 sensors that we record at once. There's a line between the dots if those different areas of the brain are working together. It's a measure of coherence. If it's a very light line, the coherence is 0.6 or 0.7. If it's a very solid dark line like here, the coherence is 0.9 or higher. And what we see in this process of transcending, of experiencing inner silence and peace, notice gamma coherence, you don't see it. Because this is the frequency of dealing with outer objects. And where you see it is in this 8 to 10 cycle per second frequency band. You see it very strongly in the front of the brain. This is the coherence in someone practicing TM for 6 months. Elvis has been practicing TM for 8 months. He's a student at the Maharishi Institute here in town. This is someone measuring who's been meditating for 24 years. Now I can see you're sitting there thinking, I can't wait for him to tell me the difference. Because this person, 24 years, you think they'd get better at it. There's no difference. This is the first finding I found when I came back to the Brain Center in 1990. And at first it didn't make sense to me. Because by repeating things over and over, you get better at them. You practice your sales speech. You practice your golf game. You practice your piano, and as you do it, you get better. But these are different things. They're linking motor skills, they're linking mind-body coordination. The reason it's the same brainwave is with transcendental meditation, it's not a process of using the intellect to control the mind or evaluate or decide experiences. Rather, what you learn to do is how to use the natural tendency of the mind. Being a natural process, you quickly master it, and with additional practice, you don't get better at it. Now, what's the natural tendency of the mind? It's what you've been experiencing. I've tried to make this very engaging. I was told, no death by PowerPoint. But I think your mind may have wandered. You're thinking, oh, I really have to be out of here by 10. I hope this will be done. Or, I wonder what we'll be doing this weekend. It's the nature of the mind. It's the nature of the mind to search for greater happiness. It's the nature of the mind to search, to be out of boundaries. What's the larger picture? Where can I get more? That's the fundamental nature of what drives the movement of the mind. The mind doesn't move just randomly. It has a purpose. And that purposeful movement of the mind towards greater wholeness is what takes the mind within, because this experience of deep silence, of peace, is very rewarding to the mind. There's no boundaries there. You're completely whole. You're completely safe. You're completely full. And having had that subjective experience, the mind wants to go there again. That's why there's no difference here. But there is a difference. You may say, well, that's a nice rationalization, Dr. Travis, but something should change. And something does change, and that's what we see here. We have two people, the same two people, but now their eyes are open. Now they're looking at the world. Now they're processing the world. Now they're trying to figure out what's going on. They're trying to come up with the appropriate response. Now, which do you guess is the long-term meditator here? Is it the top one, or is it the bottom one? I give you all a chance to vote. Everyone who thinks the long-term meditator is the top one, raise your hand. Okay, we have a couple, that's fine. All that thinks the bottom one's the long-term meditator, raise your hand. Very good. Yeah, this is the long-term meditator. Now someone, why did you think that's the long-term meditator? What was the hint that gave that away? Yes, sir. Yes, the coherence. And you thought, wow, that's what I saw when his eyes are closed, they were transcending. This is what brain integration is fundamentally. It's bringing that brain pattern and associated experience during meditation practice where you're transcending, you're not involved with the outside world, but you're experiencing your universal nature. And having that when you're in the boardroom, having that when you're on the golf course. This is sharpening the knife. This is changing that character of awareness that you bring to everything that you do. Coherence during transcendental meditation, it's correlated with that experience of inner silence called transcendental consciousness. Hoffman reflex, it's a measure of flexibility and efficiency of motor functioning. Higher creativity. Higher creativity, this is important because you have to think out of the box to be creative. thinking out of the box is not being tied to the problem space. It's being able to be playful. And when you have this experience of inner transcendence, that's completely outside of the box. It gives you a new place to look at whatever you're doing, whatever is your problem, or that challenge that you have in your workplace. And with brain integration, you have this vertical level of the mind available. When you need to, you can go to this silent, expanded part of you. And then you go out to very focused attention to actually make it happen. Transcending leads to higher psychological development. This is work that was done with Lovinger's sentence completion test of ego development. It's the gold standard measure of ego development. This is people who practiced transcendental meditation at my university as students, and then they graduated, and we caught them 10 years later. And this is what changed on their level of ego development. That's self-awareness over that time. These are 3 control universities, which are also in the Midwest. We see very little change in ego development, and that's typically what's reported. Because for ego development to grow, you have to have more expanded experiences. You can have more experiences of change and more experiences of what you usually experience. Transcending, it leads to higher brain integration. We show that this is some research we did with high school students, American University. They came in, we measured their brain functioning, again during tasks, and we calculated the quantitative measure of brain integration. Then we randomly assigned them to be trained in either transcendental meditation or delayed start. That's a pre-test. Post-test was 3 months later. What happens in college 3 months after the beginning of a semester? It's the end of the semester. And the end of the semester, huge stress. They're staying up late, eating bad food, no exercise. All of these things break down brain integration. That's what we see in the delayed start group. Their drop is actually statistically significant. That's why after most finals, college students need to take a week or 2 to recover. This was a brain integration in the meditating students. This is a brain integration in the midst of a very stressful, very challenging time. And this process of transcending, going activity, transcending, going activity, we see has changed the way their brain is functioning. And so they can actually deal with the challenge not as a stress. Under challenge, the whole brain is functioning more effectively. We love challenge. That's why you're in business. Because you can drive your level of challenge. And that's where you grow. When the challenge gets too high, the brain downshifts. And so this challenge stress line is not a hard line, it's based on perception. When you think that, oh no, I can't do this, the brain downshifts. When you're getting this growing experience of silence, of self-awareness inside, you just find you're more resilient. You just find you have a more stable basis. You can handle greater challenge without it becoming stress. And so your life is transformed. Rather than going to work and dealing with all the problems, you're going to work to have fun with these challenges. Oh boy, what's going to be waiting for me at work? Because you know you can deal with it. You know you have access to inner creativity. We found a similar finding with school administrators. This is in San Francisco. Again, with baseline and then 3 months later. Greater levels of brain integration. And also, remember the chart we showed you here. And I put the TM on here not to suggest, boy, if you meditate, you're going to be a great manager. Or you're going to be a great athlete. Or you're going to be a great musician. They're 2 different things. But what I wanted to make the point is when you're transcending, you're exercising the brain in a way that's seen in successful people. You're adding another engine to your ability to be successful. You're bringing inner wakefulness, and then you're using all of the important tools that you learned in school and that you have from experience, and you put them together. And so you're putting broad awareness along with your focused attention so you can become excellent in whatever is your chosen profession. Here's my conclusion. Transcendental meditation is a means to develop all the elements of mind-brain development and is the basis for excellence in every profession or field of activity. So if you like reading, here's some books. Also at mum.edu/online, there's 4-lesson courses, which go into many of the points here. And this is my contact information. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions from the audience?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm very interested in, I'm a psychiatrist, but very involved in brain health.
Yes.
That's my focus to brain health. Clearly, your opposition is mindfulness meditation. So imagining John Kabat-Zinn is debating with you. How would you respond to where mindfulness is going? It's also worldwide now compared to TM. How would you compare? I understand the focus of attention and the open monitoring is part of mindfulness. That you're differentiated. How would you respond to mindfulness meditation as your competition?
Excellent question. Just to summarize it for those in back, what would I say to John Kabat-Zinn in terms of the role, the place that mindfulness plays relative to TM? As Jonathan said, there are competitors. The way I would talk with John Kabat-Zinn is just to bring out there's different categories of meditation. Mindfulness is very good at allowing you to understand that relationship between you and your environment that you're in. It may help you to deal with a specific situation. It's a coping tool which can be useful, but it's important to learn how to sharpen the knife. I would suggest to John Kabat-Zinn, teach your subjects transcendental meditation. Because sharpening the knife, making the mind more alert and whole, less busy, is going to allow them to be more successful in their mindfulness meditation. And this is indeed what's found. People who practice mindfulness, there's some level of satisfaction, but if they want more, they practice TM. And what they notice, transcending, it leads them to that experience so quickly in such an easy way. What I would try to do is let John realize I value the tradition that mindfulness has come. All of these meditations that we've talked about, Vipassana, compassion meditation, there have been many years, many generations of very sincere people trying to understand inner subjectivity and how we can maximize inner subjectivity. And I want to let them know I respect that and respect that they're different. So let us look at all the tools. And what John Kabat-Zinn would probably say, he said it at the Mind Life Institute, he would say, let's stop talking about enlightenment. Let's talk about being mindful. Why? Because that's what they do in their meditation. TM, we can talk about enlightenment because enlightenment, which is a squishy thing, is simply brain integration. It's simply integrating brain functioning in the internal experience of inner transcendence along with daily activity. So now what you have in your awareness, in one awareness, is something which is silent, immovable, unbounded, and that's who you are. And the mind's thinking, and the senses perceiving, and the body acting. That's your individuality functioning. What you have in one awareness is 100% of who you are. Because who we are is a being who thinks and acts and interacts, but we're also a being who is awake, which is whole and complete. So I think that's what I would say to John. Thank you, John. Yes? You call in people, I'll just answer.
Thanks. My question is also in relation to mindfulness meditation. If you take Ellis's brain graph, are you telling me that no thoughts came into his mind during that time?
No. What I'd be telling you is this. And thank you for bringing up that question because it's a really subtle point that we're trying to make here. TM, there could be an idea that the mind settles down to pure silence. There's pure silence for 20 minutes, and then the mind becomes active. Well, that would be nice, but it's not what's happening. It's more like this. We're getting a crossfade. You're getting a crossfade from thoughts and outward focus attention to inward focus silence. And it's moving back and forth. And this movement is done by the natural tendency of the mind. So you're not controlling, you're not being mindful, you're not attending to the experience, but rather you begin the process and you just allow the mind to move through this. Again, directed by its own natural tendency. So yes, there were thoughts there, but what's happening is there's silence and then it goes and it becomes increasingly more, as you meditate. Did that answer your question? And the main difference, I think, between mindfulness, at least as I see it, between mindfulness and TM, is the orientation. What you're told to do is remain being mindful, remain attending. Keep the attention turned without. The idea that the attention can turn within and transcend is not there. And that's is a fundamental difference. And we see that in the brain waves. We see theta, EEG during mindfulness. We see alpha during TM. And I like the brain waves. Well, I'm a neuroscientist for one, but two, it gives an objective measure to answer questions like you're having. Maybe semantically, this might not seem that different. Semantically, when someone in Vipassana talks about having attention on the breath and someone in mindfulness talks about having attention on the breath, it's completely different, as some people have noticed. When you go to the brain waves, we see this is what's happening during that experience. And so if someone come up to me and this has happened and they say, I experienced this during my mindfulness practice. And I would say, fine, let's look at the brain waves. And so it helps us to cut through a lot of the semantic confusion and to allow us to appreciate the different categories and how they work. Did that answer your question?
So, he was having kids. If I did mindfulness, if you check my brain, would it look the same as Edison's brain?
It would look different. There would be is the brain waves would be a little bit slower. It's called theta. And also to be a little bit faster.
In which case?
During the mindfulness.
Okay.
And what you see basically in mindfulness versus TM is the brain waves are much more spread out. You would see coherence here in theta. You see coherence here in alpha 2. And also what's reported in some research, there's coherence here in beta and gamma. Because there's a lot of stuff going on. When someone practices TM, it's as though the whole frequency chart simplifies. And where we see the peak coherence, as you can see here, is in this frequency. Now why is that happening? Because the brain's the interface between us and the world. And what is happening is all of the thinking and processing and doing is settling down. And what's becoming more and more is just silence and peace.
The nice thing about mindfulness is it teaches you, when a thought comes, to acknowledge it and then gently take yourself back, not to beat up on yourself for having this thought.
Exactly.
Which is what I like.
Yeah. And that's an excellent coping tool. That's using the knife in a specific way. What TM is going to do is sharpen the knife. And what that means, your reaction to the different situations is going to be different. The insight you have in different situations are going to be different. You may continue to do your mindfulness practice. And many people are doing that because they like that tool in their daily life. But they also want to sharpen their knife.
So what do you suggest, a bit of both?
For those who wish to, what I suggest is everyone should sharpen their knife. And then however you use your knife, use your knife. But don't do it like in the same time or really together. And this is so critical because you can see how subtly different the mechanisms of meditation are. If you do them too close together, you mix the different practices and suddenly you're not doing anything. And so if you do 2 or 3 meditations, make sure they're separate in time. And make sure when you sit in, I'm saying, okay, now transcendental meditation, transcending, these are the rules. Now mindfulness, okay, these are the rules. Because the rules are different in each one. And what this does is it continues to pay tribute to the tradition which developed the rules to develop that type of meditation. Thank you very much.
John and then Tracy.
And then get some people in back too.
Thank you for this. I'm interested in Einstein. If we were able to go back and do some work on his brain when he was alive, and as an amateur musician, how would we perhaps understand his kind of great breakthroughs that he made?
Yeah, Einstein's brain was quite interesting. And this is sort of a tribute to science. When he died, what they did is they took his brain, they cut it into little slices and looked at it. On one level, it's missing the brilliance of that human being. But that's what they did. And where his brain was different is not in the front, the boss of the brain, not in the sides, and that's where you compute details of experience. It was in the back part of the brain here. And this is where you create a physical space within which you think and act. And for him, he didn't have more brain cells, which are the part of the brain which does the work. He had more of the connecting fibers. And so he had a more real experience. His thought experiments weren't mental imagery. For him, that was actually a concrete experience. So that was happening in the back of the brain, but I think there was something more. I think he must have had some connection with inner silence. Because this is not limited to a meditation experience. Yes, with TM, it's a systematic way to get there. But this is the silence which is always there, always underlying our thinking and experience. This is where your intuitions come from. It's part of human life. And many people have developed this spontaneously, as we saw in the athletes. They didn't practice any meditation. They had higher brain integration because of everything they did, their rest, their physical exercise, their diet, how they use their mind, whatever their spiritual practices are. All of those, every experience is changing the brain. Every experience is leaving its trace in the brain. And if you have more expanded experiences, those are the circuits that are being activated. So I would think that, yes, Einstein must have had coherence in the front of his brain at the same time. And that's getting more at who he was, not just a slice of the brain.
Tracy.
I just wanted to, you said that you measure connectivity through the blood flow. I wanted to get clarity on that. So if the blood flow is inhibited, then is the connectivity in?
Great. So what that measurement is, it's neural imaging. It's magnetic resonance imaging. And when the oxygen in the blood is, when the hemoglobin in the blood is oxygenated or deoxygenated, it acts differently in a radio field. So that's the technical aspect of MRI. The response is very slow. It takes about 3 seconds. So if you flash a light in your eye, 3 seconds later you'll see where the difference is, even though the effect has been instantaneous. So it has very poor temporal resolution. But its value is structural resolution. And what they do is they simply look at correlation. What is the rise and fall of blood flow in different parts of the brain? And so it's a simple correlation measure. Their connectivity is high correlation in the blood flow. And so that's how the whole connectivity research was done. Thank you. Yeah, Tracy.
I'm almost asking the opposite of the Einstein question. Is there's this whole thing about after you had a baby, you had like porridge break, okay? And you think, no, it's I'm not an intellectual. But do you think there's a correlation between like lack of mindfulness and inner silence because you just don't have the time, or have you looked at that?
Not that specific point, but the key thing is, and it's not a point I made in my talk, and it's as significant as everything I said here, and that is your brain is a river and not a rock. Your brain is a river and not a rock. Your brain's a self-adapting organ. It doesn't have a crystalline structure. Throughout your life, whatever you put your attention on, it leads to a specific cascade of activity in the brain, and those connections are changed. When you leave here today and you walk to your car, you're going to see the world in a different way because of the ideas, because of what your focus has been on here. So that's constantly happening. Neuroscience used to think that happened when you were little and you sort of became frozen as an adult. No, your brain is a river, not a rock. It's changing throughout your life. So, being a parent, I have 3 children, so I really love parenting. And it's the best training because of that point of experience changing the brain. You'll having a physiology which is 3 months old and trying to see how consciousness is coming into that physiology and appreciating it as the child is beginning to explore the world around it. Now what happens for mothers is you tend to completely give up yourself for your child. And you have to for the first 8 or 9 months because in that time, they cannot be out of your sight. Because of the brain connections, when you leave their vision, you are gone. You're dead. And it's a very stressful experience for the child. And that's why they cry and they have their temper tantrums. You may be thinking, why are they overreacting? I just have to go to the bathroom. But the reality is, you have disappeared. And so the mother is on call 24/7. If you don't have support system, what happens? It becomes a porch brain. Because when we sleep is actually giving the brain a bath. During the day, you use neurotransmitters, proteins, enzymes that break down during the day. You make about 7 grams of what's called sleep dirt. Sleep dirt is these broken down compounds which aren't helping in functioning. They're just sitting in the brain and they end up impeding mental functioning. So if you don't get a good night's sleep, all of us, we know, we have porch brains. We can talk to people, we can deal with the world, but we can't think globally. We can't think quickly. We don't enjoy the world around us. So that's the downside of parenting, but the plus side of parenting is, and what grows with mothers especially, is your ability to not function here, but function here. Because for teaching children, they don't have words until they're 6 or 7 years of age. So you have to know what they need. And so your brain is actually changing, so you're more in touch with inner intuition. The brain's a river, not a rock. When the child is older and then you start going back into business, you still bring that intuition with you. You still bring that richness of the experience of raising a children, of being a mother, into the business world. And you're contributing something completely new, unique. If you are a CEO of an organization, your organization is completely different if there's some guy who's head of the organization. So yes, the brain is a river, not a rock. Yes, it's very challenging to be a parent. Yes, it's very rewarding too. Thank you. Yeah.
Question at the back, and then I'll come to you. Yes.
I'll get the very back. Thank you. Loud and clear, please.
Yeah. What is the role of emotions in I mean, if you have a physiological process happening, you feel stress, your kidney or your adrenal glands, or your gut, how does this affect the brain functioning? And they are separate to thoughts. Thoughts you can control, thoughts you can detach and you can let them go. But your physiological processes that you don't have direct control over, like your adrenal glands, like your churning in your stomach, how do they influence you getting into your alpha state, getting into your transcendental meditation state?
Great question. Excellent question. First, where is the brain in the body? I mean, I sort of suggested it's here between the ears, but it's not. You know, technically it is. That's what we call the brain. But where is that organ which is governing, taking information from the environment, processing that information, deciding what to do, storing it up? Then the brain is throughout the physiology. The brain includes the heart. What the heart is doing is you go to a fight or flight response, and the heart rate goes from maybe 60 or 70 beats per minute to 140. The brain actually sends information back to the brain and says, okay, slow down. I think I mixed that up. The heart sends information back to the brain to say, brain, slow down. And the way it does it is, it's very interesting. It's not a direct response, it's an indirect response. It's an indirect response from the baroreceptors that are in the artery. So the heart is giving us global information back to the brain. The gut is getting its due prominence at this time. The gut controls immune functioning. The gut controls sympathetic activation. The gut controls moods. The gut is completely important. And in our society where we have sterile foods and where we have antibiotics, it's disrupting the whole internal activity of the gut. The gut has more DNA mass than the rest of the body. The gut has 10 times more organisms in it than the rest of the body. We have this symbiotic relationship with the gut. So yes, the gut is sending information up. The brain is the CEO. All of the departments send information to you. You decide what to do, and it goes out. All of the parts of the body, including what you're talking about, proprioception, noticing what's happening in the kidneys, what's happening in the lungs, all that goes up to the brain. And that's contributing overall to how we process the world. And I have a lecture where I talk about low road and high road of processing. And that is when information comes into the brain, our first response is called low road. And it's only low because it uses lower brain areas. And this gives us the immediate global evaluation of the situation. It happens in less than 1/10 of a second. That's how you get your immediate response of what the situation is. And this is where the source of your intuition comes from. You walk into a meeting, you look at the person on the other side of the table, you know immediately if you're going to make a deal with this person. Why? Maybe the pattern, maybe how they're talking, maybe how they're sitting, maybe how they're interacting with you, maybe how genuine their smile is when they look at you. You know, there's not a specific point, you're getting a global evaluation. So this is the emotional response, and then you actually process it. It takes much longer, and the two of those come together. Your immediate emotional response and the ongoing activity. Now how this all comes together for transcending, well, your body has to be healthy to transcend. If you're not healthy, you'll start to meditate, and it'll be a cloudy meditation, you might go to sleep or something. Because the brain is the interface, indeed, the brain, in this case the whole body, is the interface between us and the world. So if the body is healthy, it's going to support clear, reliable transcending. And the opposite is also true, because when our awareness is more whole, more full, the way we're responding to the world is different, and so the body responds differently. Remember the college kids in the middle of finals week, and they had high levels of brain integration. They were in a very stressful period, but it wasn't stress for them. Their body didn't show all of the markers of stress. And so there's a constant feedback going on there. Great question. Thank you. Yes?
There's a question from Anna, and then we'll come back to the front.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for a most provoking presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
I have two questions.
Please.
Could you expand more on music and children? And secondly, what progress is being made in the prevention and treatment of dementia and Alzheimer's?
Excellent. Two important ones. First one, music and children. Especially before age 10, music is very powerful because 5, 6, 7, they're picking up words, language, so they're becoming a more cognitive individual. If at the same time they can be playing music, which is a non-cognitive experience. It's a felt experience. You sing, you feel the air in your lungs. You play a viola, you feel the vibrations of that instrument. It's a felt experience, and it's giving you a different way to evaluate. And also what it's doing, it's rewiring the brain. It's taking the parts of the brain that are not semantic, which are not words, which are not logical and linear, and it's more building the part of the brain that's rhythm, that's whole, that's harmonic. So music is important, and too often music is out of the curriculum. Why? Because we have to have our children go to great schools, so for that when they're 2, they should learn the multiplication tables and so on. They're taking the whole cognitive development of the individual, and they're forgetting the emotional, the aesthetic development of the individual. So I think music should be part of school. That said, if your child doesn't want to do music, that's okay. Something I learned as a parent. You know, we think we're all knowing. You can't tell your kids what to do. And it's good because the kids are not a lump that you're moving around. Your kid is a lively, living human being with tendencies and dreams and preferences, I find that's what I would do as a parent. I would try to figure out, what does my child want to do? And that's where this delicate feedback, going back and forth, that's where the emotional value that the second Tracy was bringing up, that is what grows. And when you're in tune with your child in that, you support them. So if they want to try music, and then you have music. My wife played music her entire life, and we have a piano. And my youngest daughter would be playing music, and so my wife said she should have music lessons. So we asked her, do you want to have music lessons? And Avery said yes. She went to have music lessons. And the music teacher was very dogmatic, and Avery stopped going to music. So it's very important with our children that we're listening to them and supporting what they're doing. So that's children and music. Now dementia. The point about dementia is there's an individual called Bredesen, NIH researcher, and he would do study after study, and he was perplexed because in reviewing the study there were 32 different major factors that contributed to Alzheimer's. And he said, wait a minute, 32 different factors. Alzheimer's isn't the result of one thing going wrong. It's not like a disease. It's not a mental functioning. And he labeled all of these, and he says, what Alzheimer's is, it's a metabolic dysfunction. What Alzheimer's is, it's the sum of all the decisions we've made throughout our life. And so he lays out 32 different things you can do to help with Alzheimer's. One of them is get 8 hours of sleep. Some people don't need 8 hours of sleep, but get enough sleep so you're completely rested. Because what sleep is doing, remember the sleep dirt, part of the sleep dirt is amyloid. And amyloid plaque is part of what gets stuck into cells and kills brain cells. So get a good night's sleep. Physical exercise. He recommends 30 minutes of physical exercise 3 to 4 times a day. Excuse me. You are listening. I am impressed. Yes. Thank you. 30 minutes of exercise 3 or 4 times a week. Now why exercise? When you exercise and the heart beats to fuel the skeletal muscles, it goes up and brings oxygen to the brain. If you don't have physical exercise, the amount of oxygen going to the brain is getting less and less. And so therefore brain metabolism is getting less and less. So you need to physically exercise. And this goes throughout. This is important for kids, it's important for adults, it's important throughout our life. We have to be sensitive to the bodily state and so on. But just think how you can get more exercise into your day. He found how you use your mind. Do you continue to require yourself to look at different points of view? Do you continue to try new things? He found meditation is important. And indeed, first he said any meditation, and then he found that those clients coming in with Alzheimer's, if they practiced transcendental meditation, the benefits were much stronger. And when he looked at the different descriptions of different meditations, he could see why that would be the case. You know, are you sharpening the knife or are you using the knife? There's a number of issues of diet. So are you having enough B12 and enough vitamin D? It should be a low glycemic diet. You shouldn't be eating high sugary content. And so Bredesen is his name. And you have I'll just put my contact information. If you're interested, email me. Or maybe what I'll do is I'll send this to Katie and she can send it out to everyone. And you can have the research. I think that's what I'll do. I'll mail this to Katie. Email it to Katie, and then she can send it, make this available to everyone. And then, and what it will be is 2 papers. It was interesting, nobody would fund his research because he was looking at 2, not 32. He said, I want to look at 2 things. No one would fund it. The funders wanted 1 thing. Because if you have 2 things, you don't know what the real cause is. So they didn't want to put their money on it. But Bredesen, but wait a minute, it's not an individual cause. It's not an individual factor. There's synergistic effects going on here. Nobody would fund him. So what you'll see in these papers is simply case studies. And that's actually how science advances. When you get a new paradigm, you have a case study. You just explain, this is what happened. You don't worry about cause and effect and double blind and all of these things in science. You just say, okay, what do we see happening in this situation? So we'll send those to you, but as you can tell, I'm pretty passionate. I think that this is the key for Alzheimer's. And this is what I'm doing. This is what my wife is doing. And we were just always thinking, okay, we have to get in more exercise. How are we going to get exercise? What you do is you can plan it into your day. Park your car, not right by the door. Park your car, 2 or 3 minutes, walk away. Walk up and down the stairs rather than take an elevator. So you can put into your day the exercise you need. Block out sleep. Again, sleep is removing sleep dirt. It's not a waste of time. It's important. It lets you be more clear and so on. Excellent questions. Thank you.
Time for one more question from Andy.
Two questions, please, or comments. The first is on emotional hijacking or should I say emotional flooding first, which shuts off certain functions of the brain like the executive function, shuts off, and then there's too much blood flow, too much circulation, which stops clear thinking and clarity. And then the second comment or question is on the yogis and how with long-term meditation, that brain integration, the neural pathways are so integrated that there's so much neuroplasticity in that, and then there's a connection between the frontal brain and the back of the brain and the pineal gland and pituitary gland, and there's a lot of integration. So I want you to comment on that.
Very good. So the first question, in terms of emotional flooding, that unfortunately is how the brain is set up. And it's given a derogatory term, emotional flooding. What it's actually doing is it's giving you a global evaluation of the situation. Because what the global evaluation is giving you is what's the important point. We take in 40 billion bits of information at a time. We attend to 2,000 bits. Because only what you attend to is what you get. What are you going to attend to? That's what the global evaluation is doing. And then shortly after comes a cognitive evaluation. I think the important thing is you need to do things to reprogram the low road response, the immediate emotional response. Because stress, pressure, lack of support, those program the low road response. And then what comes up in any situation is resistance, lack of patience, and so on. What transcending is doing, it's reprogramming the low road response. When you go into a situation, what immediately comes to the mind is growth, is excitement, is curiosity, is wholeness. And so rather than trying to stop the emotional response, which you can't, you reprogram the emotional response. And when that comes together with your cognitive processing, it's going to give you a more accurate perception of what's there. It's not in terms of past stress and past needs. It's in terms of what's there right now. I want to grow, and so on. And your second question. Remind me? Oh, the yogis, yeah. Yeah, this is indeed what's happening. The brain's a river, not a rock. Moving the brain back and forth, and I think this is critical. Moving the brain back and forth from transcendence to focus activity, transcendence, focus activity. Those two begin to be coordinated. And then having both of those coordinated and continuing to this part of you, which is almost an infinite ocean, flowing through your senses, flowing through your mind, you begin to transform the senses. And you stop seeing things just as superficial differences. You begin to see what is the harmony, what is the pattern which is putting things together. Because we're not classical beings, we're quantum mechanical beings, we're intimately connected. And you begin to see that. It's a perception event. And then you continue to grow and you begin to realize that all of this difference on the outside is really activity of a fundamental field. It's taking expressed in different ways, but it's all activity of a fundamental field. And this is the ultimate neuroplasticity, where you begin to live life not as difference, not as things that are dying, not as things that are changing, and you live life more as that everything is flowing together. It's flowing together to give different expressions of what can be there. Thank you very much. Thank you for reading.
Thank you very much. I'm sure most of us want to be more focused, more creative, more emotionally centered. So it's interesting for me, at least, to have seen the neuroscience behind it. So thank you very much for the time here with us this morning. Thank you to all of you for attending. For those of you that are interested in finding out more about transcendental meditation, I think there's been a few pamphlets distributed with information on. You can also come and chat to Josephine in front here, and there's a few of her team. It is something that you can learn to do locally. So for those of you who want to ask a few more questions, please do so. Otherwise, go into the rest of your day. Enjoy it. It is a Friday after all. Have a lovely weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you.